Hi, I'm Valerie, and I am so glad you found me here at my podcast, Generation Exhausted, your podcast that tackles all things midlife burnout. Do you feel total dread at the thought of going to work tomorrow? Are your relationships stale and unfulfilling? Can you even remember the last time you felt passionate, fulfilled, or excited about life? If you can't even remember the last time you felt these things, then you are at the right place. Because I'm a psychologist and I specialize in helping you reclaim passion, purpose, and energy. And not just at work, but in all areas of your life. So stay with me for a few minutes and let's talk about this. Hi, welcome to Generation Exhausted. This is Valerie, and you find me here excited to talk to you about all things burnout, but more important than that, all things burnout recovery. So I'm going to take a quick pivot away from the topic that we have been discussing the last few weeks. We have really dived deeply into spirituality and institutional religion. And before that, we were talking about marriage and parenting and gender roles and career. And I went back and forth on, okay, do we talk about this? Do we not? I can't not talk about this because I feel like it is so fundamental to my journey of burnout recovery and my own transformation of mind, heart, body, and soul. And that topic is how I have increased and improved my relationship with my own body. So if you're out there and you're a Gen Xer, or you might be a little more precocious, I'm noticing that my audience is sort of spanning, they can be young. You can be young out there, because you've gone through situations in your life that have in some ways matured you before your time. And I know you're out there because I've worked with you. And there may be some of you out there who are even a little older than the typical Gen X age. But I'm going to guess that more likely than not, male or female, you probably have a fairly complicated relationship with your body. Okay, how does this relate to burnout? Well, I have a good explanation for that. What I am all about is taking ownership of one's own life, journey, and destiny, and not letting outside forces inform or dictate who we are supposed to become, what we are supposed to believe, and incidentally, in this week's case, what we are supposed to look like. Now, this transformation for me, I think it came on the heels of a lot of other growth journeys, because I will tell you, I have tried, like many of you out there, I've really tried to have a healthy relationship with my body. I think what I really was trying to do actually was have a relationship with my body, and I thought it was healthy to the extent that it looked like what I had believed it was supposed to look like. And that right there is the difference. We have been told from very, very young, and if you're a woman, it's usually around the age of 5 or 6, that most little girls believe that there's something wrong with them. That's kind of a mind-blowing number, but we have been made to believe through the air that we breathe, as if we were a fish swimming in water. We don't even know that we have been trained to be unsatisfied with these bodies that we have been given. And usually, no matter what that body looks like, we will believe that there's something not okay with it. And I believe that that is something that is very, very pervasive in female culture, thin culture. And I also believe that this is a big piece of male culture as well, especially I think it's growing to be more so now more than ever. So I wanted to just talk with you a little bit about my own journey, about how I have confronted my own complicated relationship with food and my body, and really how I have experienced a lot of burnout, sort of a slow burning burnout over many, many years, and how in just this last year, actually, my relationship with my body, which has integrated itself into my own relationship with my soul, has absolutely transformed regarding this part of my growth journey, that I am a different person when it comes to food and when it comes to how I experience myself or my embodied self. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start. You'll get to know a little bit about me on this episode. That I was born into a home of dieters, and this is probably not unusual. I'm a child of the 70s, and we were born, most of us anyways, were born with mentors, caregivers, who were just as integrated into this idea that to be a woman, maybe even to be a man, it was valuable to be smaller, that the less space we took up in the world, the better. And my mom actually was employed for a period of time with a company, and she was a lecturer for that weight loss company. And while she didn't at all sort of impose any idea of needing to be thin on me, I don't think she needed to. It just was something that I picked up on. And once again, it just has to do with the culture that we're raised in. And I guess I definitely don't, I don't have any hard feelings about this. It's just my reality. I was one of those kids that, okay, this is too funny, but I typically had like a bright green or a bright orange finger because I was the kid that would sneak into the Jell-O gelatin, like the powdery stuff, and I would wet my finger and I would suck on Jell-O gelatin powder because it was so deliciously sweet. That was how seldom I got my hands on anything that was sweet as a kid. And so my relationship with food and with sweet food and the scarcity around it kind of set me up from a very, very early age to have a complicated relationship with food, that some food was good and some food was bad, and to the extent that it tasted good, it was probably bad, and to the extent that it tasted bad, it was probably good. And this just kind of carried on. Something else that I have a memory of in the cultivation of my complicated relationship with food and my body is that I have an older sister who was always thinner than me, and we were only just a couple of years apart, and I couldn't fit into her clothes. And I was not a large child. I was never obese, but I was large enough to feel uncomfortable in my own skin. Now, this carried on into my adult years. And certainly after I partnered up with my husband, we got married, we started a family. And of course, the many years of having babies created just more of the same, a very negative relationship with my body. I remember being completely held hostage to the scale, especially during those, periods of time between babies. And I, if I lost a pound or two, all was well in the world. I was happy and I felt okay with myself. And then if the opposite happened, sadly enough, my husband would come home from work or from school or whatever, and he would see me very, very depressed. And he would say, "You've weighed yourself, haven't you?" So I look back on that and I'm sad. I'm sad because my mental energy was consumed with the need that I had to look a certain way to be okay in the world. And this is why this is not just a body issue. This is a spiritual issue. This is an identity development issue. I was consumed with the belief that I had picked up from culture, from the media, from my peer group, from home and family, that to take up space in the world was problematic. And to the extent that I could make myself be small, I was okay. And that really, really makes me sad, because I am reflecting on how much time and energy I spent hating myself, hating my form, hating my body. And it took a lot of time and energy for many, many, many years that I could have been spending emotionally and mentally making the world a better place. But what I was instead doing was I was bouncing around diet plans. I had all sorts of motivational programs I would come off and on. I would sometimes avoid social activities because going there meant too much temptation, or I would go and I would bring things home and hide the food and save them in my freezer for, another time. But I was in this perpetual state of deprivation and reward. And I'm sure this is probably resonating with a lot of you, because I don't think I'm very unusual. I also really, really noticed that my complicated relationship with food extended to my completely losing touch with this idea of hunger and fullness. I only realized this like last year, you guys, because I'm going to really talk about the turnaround point, which happened about a year ago. I didn't have a relationship with hunger and fullness. Well, let me rephrase that. I did have a relationship, but it was a very, very confused relationship with hunger and fullness. I tended to eat more over certain periods of time, such as maybe over a weekend, or maybe when I was on vacation or during a holiday season. I would eat when I was full, and then I spent the vast majority of my time not eating when I was hungry. And couple that with, if it tasted good and I actually enjoyed it, that was probably something I had to really limit. And if it tasted bad, or if it was something that I should have eaten, I thought that definitely that meant I should probably not be eating it. So you can only imagine, or maybe you can't imagine, maybe this is your actual reality. I had a really confusing relationship with the food that I ate, which of course is a pervasive issue because of course we are eating food multiple times a day. Okay, let's move on to numbers. This is where I've always joked around that math is not my subject, but I will say I probably spent more time mentally playing a numbers game than the most committed mathematician. The numbers had to do with pant sizes, the numbers had to do with calories, the numbers had to do with the weight on the scale. I was consumed with numbers. And boy, how I have come a long way in this last year around the concept of numbers, and have realized that, guess what, you guys? These numbers are pretty neutral. There's not, I mean, they're directive, and they can kind of guide and direct certain things sometimes, but by and large, the amount of time that they consumed in my life was pervasive. And I was tired of it. I had a sense that I had a complicated relationship with this part of me, and I didn't know what to do because I was a fairly decent dieter. I could go on a diet and lose 5 or 10 pounds over a few month period of time. But what I also had an awareness of is that as soon as I went on even a long weekend vacation, or if any holiday came up, I would soon go right back to where I began, which I've come to learn is this concept called a defended weight. And what that means is our bodies, generally speaking, have a defended weight, a weight that is there where they're comfortable being, and more often than not, it will acclimate itself and return to that weight unless something extremely drastic happens. And usually when something extremely drastic happens, that is not a good thing. That means massive deprivation or something like a disease happens. And so being that I never had an eating disorder, I would consider myself sort of a garden variety, lifelong dieter. My body definitely had a defended weight. And it became very clear to me that it took an enormous amount of emotional, mental, physical, and psychological energy to do this thing, and that quickly thereafter, it didn't even seem to matter anyways. But like someone who is committed to the definition of insanity, I would just start over and do it again because I, of course, was the failure. There was something wrong with me. And that is exactly what this culture taught me to believe about myself. First of all, that there was something wrong with me, that I was not small enough. And secondly, that there was something wrong with me that I couldn't get small enough. And that's where this issue, I believe, is a spiritual development issue. It's this idea that I am consuming something from authority figures on the outside that tell me who I am supposed to become and what it takes to be acceptable in this world. And I never even question this, is the thing that kind of blows my mind. Okay, so let's go to almost exactly 1 year ago, September 2020. I had taken my son to a college football game. My son and I are big football fans together. He and I go to pro football games together, and we go to college football games together. And it is a tender memory that we have, and we've been doing this since he was very little. And we had gone to a college football game, and it was about 2 hours away, and we'd visited on the way there. And by the end of the college football game, I think he was tired of visiting with his mom and threw the headphones on, and he was doing his own thing. So I took that as my cue to do my own thing, and I jumped on my Audible account, and I recognized there was a title on there that I had not read yet, It was on there, but something that I was mildly curious about. And I started listening to a book by the name of The Anti-Diet. Mind you, I was not much of a consumer of anything having to do with intuitive eating because I didn't believe it could be possible to become healthy in this way. And I also, you guys, had no idea that this was a spiritual development issue. To me, it was a character flaw. There was something wrong with me that I couldn't get thin enough. And if I just kept trying and working harder, and if I found that just right diet, then alas, everything would be okay. I'm chuckling now because I'm chuckling at my own innocence, and also I'm overcome with gratitude at the growth and transformation that has come into my life in this one way, in this 1 year, as I have overcome thin culture burnout. So I started listening to this book, and for whatever reason, this time something was different. And I think it's because I had been working so hard in the area of spiritual development. I had been working so hard in the area of becoming individuated, meaning that I was trying really hard to be true to my inner sense of wholeness. And I had also really taken up this idea that I got to be the captain of my own ship, that I was a personal authority in my own life, and that nothing out there, whether it be parents or pastors or church leaders or culture, they didn't get a say in who I was becoming. And that was sort of a newish concept to me in my own development. And so as I was listening, all of a sudden, all of these aha moments started erupting in my mind, my heart, my soul, my body. And I started recognizing that this concept fell into the very same paradigm of all of the other things that I was learning about becoming an authority of my own life. Okay, now how does this play out? The reason why it plays out is because what I began to learn in this book is I started learning about the history of thin culture. And I started learning about this idea that thinness is a social construct, and furthermore, that the ideal body, weight, and appearance is always a representation of that which is most challenging to achieve in the culture and in the time period where people are living and breathing and doing life. So if you go to a culture or go to a time period where food was scarce, it was beautiful, acceptable, and actually sexy to be a large-bodied woman. And in this culture, where we live in a world of excess, of course the opposite would be true, which is that which is hardest to attain is that which is most desirable. Okay, you guys, this may just not be that big of a deal to you, but this blew my mind. I couldn't believe that I had become consumed in a construct where the culture had embedded in me a belief system about what I was supposed to look like, and that I had bought this hook, line, and sinker. This blew my mind. And so when I recognized that I was a victim of a larger cultural construct that told me what I was supposed to be like, the little rebel in me was like, oh, no, you don't. Oh, no, you don't. And all of a sudden, something awoke in me that was like, wait a second. And I started for the first time to cultivate a more loving and kind relationship with this beautiful instrument that I have been given. And it was and has been and continues to be an extraordinarily fascinating journey, because around that period of time, actually, I had taken up CrossFit, and interestingly, my body was not getting smaller. My body was actually getting a little bit bigger. It was getting stronger. My shoulders and my back were responding pretty well to the weightlifting I was doing and things. And I was really in I was in a conundrum, because I was enjoying this. And I knew weightlifting was good for me because I'm in my mid-40s. And I also, furthermore, I belong to a gym that is just warm and friendly. And the culture was a lot of fun. And I actually kind of likened it to this idea that I got to go to recess every morning and play with my friends. That's what it felt like to me. And yet, that which was deeply embedded in me, remember, was small is good. The smaller you are and the less space you take up in the world, the more valuable you are and the more worthy you are of love and acceptance of, from both others and yourself. And so here I am going, okay, whoa, I'm really happy. This is really fun. And yet something inside was like, you can't keep doing this. Remember the commitment you made to yourself. And then all of a sudden, when I read this thing or listened to this thing about how I'd been socialized to believe that small was better, all of a sudden I actually kind of got angry. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be anything that some nebulous force out there, whether it be, the Instagram models, or back from when I was a teenager, it was like the 17 magazine models. Those influences all of a sudden didn't get to win, but there was something deep inside of me that said, no, you don't. No, you don't. I get to be the captain of my own ship, and I get to choose how I feel about this instrument that I have been given. And so I didn't realize how powerful this force had over me. But what ended up happening was I came to some realizations as I continued to listen to this book, and I continued to contemplate and think and process, and then actually move into a space of action where I started changing the ways that I thought and behaved in relationship with food and my body. Okay, so let me walk you through some of the biggest aha moments that I had. Let's see here. Okay, so actually, I've already been walking you through all of these aha moments. I have a couple of little notes I've written, and I've done a pretty good job of talking about this relationship that I had with food and culture. And so what ended up happening was I began to shift. And day by day, I went into the major anxiety of trying to unlearn a myriad of behaviors that I had learned, really, you guys, since I was probably, I remember starting to not like my body when I was probably, I might have made it to 10 years old. It may have been more like 8 years old, but I remembered feeling too fat in my jeans as a child and putting my jeans on to go to bed at night because I had this theory that if I slept in my jeans, they would be baggier when I woke up. Now, I know you're laughing out there, because I'm kind of laughing sharing it. But I would imagine that if you were to be totally honest with yourself, you probably have some funny memories of your own relationship with your body and what you did to mitigate your own anxiety around what to do about this body that you had been given that was not acceptable. So what I started doing is this is going to sound like totally obvious, but maybe not, because I don't think I'm all that unusual. I started eating food that I wanted to eat, right? I know that's a little weird, like, duh. But for me, that was weird. In other words, if I wanted a second serving of something after dinner, after I'd start eating my first serving, guess what I did? I ate it. Also, I really started paying heightened attention to when I got full. And once again, this seems like it ought not to be rocket science, but with someone who had a very complex relationship with food, this was hard for me. And it was a challenge because what I had again learned is that I was a by the book eater. When my calories ran out, or when my carbs ran out, or when my protein ran out, or whatever the prescribed diet I was on, whenever those numbers hit their max, no matter what my body wanted, needed, or desired, I stopped. And so what I had to do is I had to come into relationship with this beautiful body of mine. And that was where my healing journey began. And it was kind of scary because I had never trusted that my body could actually acclimate and just be an instrument that would help me become the healthiest version of myself. One of the tenets of intuitive eating is that it's not intended to make us smaller or larger or whatever. It's about being healthy at every size. What they also teach as an aside, though, is that when we come into a healthy relationship with our bodies, usually our body sort of evens out. And, another sort of interesting aha moment that I had as I was learning about this philosophy in overcoming this particular part of my burnout journey was that most people that diet are the heaviest people because they confuse their bodies so much that their bodies lose track of how to become, they get out of equilibrium. And most dieters eat more than they are supposed to because their bodies are so terrified of deprivation that they actually perpetually eat more than their bodies actually want, need, and desire. And this was definitely, on a small scale, my situation. And so I just had to trust that whatever happened would happen. And guess what? I had to sit in this. I'm actually uncomfortable even talking about this now, although I'm a year in. And I thought to myself, okay, what if Valerie, you gain a few pounds? And it was like, the world will in fact end. Like, I will not be okay. But at the same time, I had truth on my side, and I knew I could not let an authority figure on the outside. This time, the authority was this large nebulous thing called culture. And I would not let this authority hold me hostage to the peace that my mind and heart and soul so desperately was craving in all areas of life and was now moving into this, in some ways, my final frontier. And so I had to become, and I'm still working on becoming, comfortable with the prospect that I may take up more space in the world as this plays out. Now, incidentally, I haven't gained weight. I don't even actually know. I put the scale away because it occurred to me that it was taking up way too much of my heart space, my soul space, my mental real estate, if you will. It was too expensive. It was too much time. And so I put the scale away. But what I've come to realize, ironically, 1 year into this journey, is that I've never felt more equilibrated in my life. I am more comfortable with my hunger and my fullness. And when I'm out and about and I'm hungry, I eat something. And when I'm done eating a dessert, I finish and I feel good. And another thing that I want to share with you in my journey towards this kind of emotional and spiritual wholeness is there was a little bit of a very interesting and unexpected grieving period that I went through. And what that was is that food was an extremely loaded subject in my psyche because of how much scarcity and deprivation was surrounded by it. And so coming onto the weekend, it was like I had this opportunity to meet this beloved relationship that I was so deprived of all week long. And so coming on the weekend was a really psychologically big deal for me. And you may or may not understand this. I'm very well aware if you have a healthy relationship with food, you may think this is insane, but I guarantee if this isn't you, there's somebody around you who will probably resonate with this and go like, oh my gosh, you get it. And so when I moved into this place of eating integrity, of eating when I was hungry and stopping eating when I was full, and eating just a little bit more intuitively, all of a sudden, a weekend was just another day. It's not to say I wouldn't look forward to fun events, or sometimes we'd go out to eat or do, get ice cream or something, which I still enjoyed. But because I had given myself permission to eat a couple pieces of chocolate, or, if there was a birthday party in the middle of the week, I'd have a piece of cake and, some ice cream, whatever. All of a sudden, that food became normal. It wasn't this amazing thing that I loved. It was the love-hate relationship went away. I was actually just able to have a really healthy, integrated relationship with the stuff. It didn't mean that I didn't enjoy it still, but all of a sudden I did actually feel a little bit of a grief period around the fact that that food was not as powerful anymore. And yet, as that grief process passed me by and I moved beyond it, what a lovely feeling it was that this food didn't dictate so much of my mental space, and I didn't find myself overeating almost ever. Now, if I was on vacation or was a party and I chose to have something a little bit of extra, again, in my training, in the reading and in the study of this process of I find it spiritual integration, I learned to not feel guilt, shame, or grief. I just went, oh, whoops, I'm not feeling all that great. Maybe I should have eaten a little bit less or whatever. But it wasn't loaded. all of a sudden I was in this place of peacefulness around this particular part of my life. Okay, so where am I now, a year in? Let me just talk to you about things that I have come to realize. Okay, one of the things that I've come to realize is a profound sense of freedom, that part of my soul journey, and I think that's what all of this I'm talking about, whether it be through parenting or relationships with the divine or institutions or marriage or all of these things that have to do with burnout where these play out. Our healing process is about coming into a space where we feel whole and we feel peaceful. I had the opposite of a peaceful relationship with my body and with this big part of my life, which is food. And 1 year in, I cannot tell you how profoundly grateful I am that I have healed so much in my relationship with food and my own body. That's why I believe to the core of my heart and soul that this is, in fact, it's a spiritual journey, because is there anything more spiritual and more profound in our own growth and development than coming into a calm and peaceful relationship with the body that we have been given? I mean, if that is one of the most important, if not the most important relationship that we can have in this world, because guess what? It's with us all the time, right? And so if you're anything like I was constantly in conflict and feeling a fairly high degree of loathing or resentment or hatefulness or shame about this body that was my companion wherever I went. My body houses my soul. My body is the thing that takes me into the world, into relationship, into all of those places where I move about growing and learning how to thrive in this world. And so in my mind, having a relationship that is open and friendly and relaxed with this body, and therefore with food, is fundamental and has been fundamental to my own spiritual development. Because here's the deal, you guys. We don't have to be out there doing bad things or engaged in negativity in the world. All we have to do is be so consumed by something so peripheral, such as the number of inches from thigh to thigh or the number of calories that I can or can't eat. All I have to do is be consumed in this business that is so unimportant, and that's the thing that will take me away from the reason why I am uniquely here in this world. And so I am convinced that this issue of body love and body acceptance and the rejection of thin culture is fundamentally a profoundly spiritual issue. And as we heal from this burnout, this idea of like, I have to give my mind, my body, my heart, and my soul to looking like whatever those people look out there on Instagram or on Facebook or on whatever it is that you're watching out there, to the extent that we hand our mental space over to and tell the world that they can dictate who we are supposed to become, they have power not only over our bodies, but over our minds. And they have the capacity to keep us not only small physically, but small from the perspective of not allowing us to do and become the things that we are here in the world to do and become. So this issue is deeply important, and burning out in this issue can consume so much of our time and energy that it will bleed into how we relate to the world, how we relate in relationships, how we relate to the divine even, because these bodies are a gift of the divine. So I just want to close by offering to each of you out there all of I want you to know that I do believe that this is something that can be overcome. I suffered from struggles with body image and a complicated relationship with food for 35-ish, no, probably closer to 40 years of my life. and I've never felt more at peace. And I'm still a work in progress, for sure. I sometimes will walk into a place and get triggered by some woman that has the body that for years and years I wished I had, and I have to just pause, go deep within, center myself, and just let that pass through me. That's part of the process of spiritual development. And so, that may be something I just, I work through over and over again. But guess what? The good news is I have a path. And I have a deeper truth and a deeper wisdom that knows that there's something so much more valuable in this beautiful body and soul than what the culture tells me I have to be. So please give me some feedback on this. Let me know through your DMs on Instagram if this is something that resonates with you. And I just want to let you know as I close that this will come up again, as will issues of spirituality, as will issues of institutional religion relationship, and marriage, and parenting, and gender roles, and employment. All of these burnout issues will come up over and over again in the application portions of my website, which is called exhaustedgen.com, exhaustedgen.com, which launches October 1st. There are many of you who have been emailing me and saying that's not live, there's nothing there. You're absolutely right at this point in September of 2021. It is in the works. There is already a wait list for those of you who want to join. If you want to join, please direct message me on Instagram at valeriehamakercomposttypepodcastp1245, and I will add you to the list so that you can get a mailer that lets you know when you can join this community where we will dig deeper into each and every one of these issues and so much more that I have discussed with my husband over the last several weeks. So good to be with you all, and I can't wait to be in deeper contact with you, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me today at Generation Exhausted. There is so much more where this came from, so jump onto my online community at exhaustedgen.com, which is exhaustedgen.com, where you can get weekly support in your push to find passion, purpose, and deeper meaning in your life again. Also, hit that subscribe button and catch me here next week. And by the way, I am really glad that you're here, because remember this: burnout is your body's and soul's way of telling you that it's finally time to have your great awakening. See you next time. Bye-bye.